My son's French girlfriend called me terrible names in her own language, thinking I was too dumb to understand. I kept serving her my homemade cake and smiled sweetly. For hours later, I whispered something in perfect French that made her face turn white as snow. If you're watching this story, please hit that subscribe button and tell me what country you're from in the comments. Let me start from the beginning and explain how I caught this sneaky woman trying to trick my sweet boy. It all began on a sunny Saturday morning in Phoenix. My 38-year-old son Jake had been telling me about his new girlfriend for months. Her name was Isabelle Laurent, and she came from a fancy city in France called Lyon. She was tiny and pretty, with perfect hair and expensive clothes that looked like they came from fancy magazines. Her English was really good, but she had that cute French way of talking that made everything sound special. "Mom," she said, holding my hands gently, "Jake talks about you every single day. I'm so happy to meet the wonderful woman who raised my sweet boyfriend." I liked her right away. Jake had dated so many silly girls who never cared about our family or asked questions about anything important. But Isabelle was different. She looked at all my family pictures and asked me to tell stories about each person. She said my cooking smelled amazing and even helped me set the table without me asking her to. Jake couldn't stop grinning during lunch, clearly head over heels in love. "Isabelle speaks 4 different languages perfectly," Jake bragged, squeezing her small hand. "She's been teaching me French words, but I'm terrible at it." "Oh, you're being too hard on yourself," Isabelle giggled, her eyes sparkling like stars. "Your accent is very cute, like a little child learning to talk." We all laughed together, and I started thinking that Jake had finally found a really good woman, someone smart and kind who might actually want to be part of our family for a long time. That happy feeling lasted exactly 38 minutes. After we finished eating, Jake got a phone call from his boss about some emergency at the construction site. I was washing dishes in my kitchen when Isabelle's phone started ringing. She answered it speaking super fast French, talking loud enough for me to hear from the next room. She probably thought she was speaking in a secret code that nobody else could crack. Here's something she didn't know about me. When I was 22 years old, I lived in Paris for 3 whole years working as a nanny for rich people, so I could save money for school. My French might sound rusty now, but I can still understand every single word. And what I heard next made me feel sick to my stomach. "Yes, Mama," she was saying in French. The old lady seems harmless enough. Fat and simple, clearly desperate to see her son get married. She'll be easy to control once I get what I want. I dropped the plate I was holding, but caught it just before it hit the floor. My hands were shaking so bad, I could barely hold on to anything. The house is bigger than Jake described, and yes, there's definitely money here to take. She mentioned his dad left them a big insurance payout. Her laugh sounded mean and cold, nothing like the sweet giggle she used when speaking English. "Don't worry about anything. I've already figured out how to get his inheritance money." American men are so stupid about family stuff. Jake is perfect for my plan. He's dumb, generous, and totally in love with me. Getting my green card will be simple once we get married, and the divorce will be even easier once I steal everything I can. 2 years at most, then I'll go back to France with American citizenship and enough cash to live like a queen. A glass slipped from my wet hands and crashed on the kitchen floor. "Mrs. Peterson, are you okay?" Isabelle rushed into the kitchen, her face full of fake worry. She was such a good actress, if I hadn't just heard her real plans in clear French. "Just clumsy old me," I managed to say, kneeling down to pick up the broken pieces. "These old fingers don't work like they used to." She quickly bent down to help me clean up the mess, moving like a graceful dancer. "Please let me take care of this. You shouldn't have to clean up after cooking such a beautiful lunch for us." The situation was so crazy I wanted to laugh and cry at the same time. This evil woman had just finished telling her mother how she planned to trick and rob my son, and now she was helping me sweep up broken glass while pretending to be the sweetest girlfriend in the world. "I have lots of practice cleaning up messes," she said with a humble laugh. "I worked as a hotel maid in France before I met Jake. It was hard work, but it taught me to be grateful when people are nice to me." Another lie told so smoothly that I almost believed her myself. Jake came back from his phone call, saying sorry over and over again. I'm really sorry about that, Mom. Work emergency, but everything's fixed now. He looked at us cleaning together, and his whole face lit up like a Christmas tree. Look at you two, already acting like mother and daughter. Isabel stood up gracefully, throwing away the broken glass pieces. Your mother is absolutely wonderful, honey. So warm and welcoming. I feel very blessed. She was incredibly good at this act, like a professional liar. Every smile, every look, every carefully chosen word was designed to make Jake believe she was the perfect girlfriend who loved him and respected his family. I found my voice somehow and managed to speak normally. Well, aren't you just the sweetest thing? Jake's right, you already feel like part of the family. We sat in my living room drinking coffee, and Isabel told us what I now knew were completely made-up stories about her life in France. She talked about struggling to pay rent, having a difficult childhood that made her appreciate Jake's kindness, and dreaming about building a wonderful life in America with the right man. Every single word was carefully chosen to make Jake feel protective and special, like he was rescuing a poor girl from a hard life. And it was working perfectly. My son believed every lie, his eyes soft with the kind of love that makes smart people do really dumb things. Tell Mom about your visa situation, Jake said gently. She's really good at dealing with government paperwork and might be able to help you figure things out. Isabel's eyes flickered for just a second, but her sweet smile never disappeared. Oh, it's a bit complicated, but not too serious. My tourist visa is still good for several more months, and Jake has been helping me understand how to get more permanent permission to stay. She paused perfectly, letting Jake fill in the romantic parts without her having to lie directly about marriage plans. She was incredibly skilled at manipulation. We're talking about getting engaged pretty soon, Jake said, reaching over to hold her hand. Once Isabel feels ready to make America her permanent home. How exciting, I said, amazed that my voice sounded so calm and normal.
When you know, I guess.
Isabel looked down shyly like a bashful schoolgirl. I never thought I would find someone as wonderful as Jake. Sometimes love surprises you in the most amazing ways. The heart had definitely been surprised tonight, but not in any good way. As they got ready to leave and Jake walked Isabel to her car, I stood by my window watching them hug goodbye. She was whispering something in his ear that made him laugh, probably spinning another beautiful lie about their future together. He looked so happy and hopeful, completely unaware that the woman in his arms saw him as nothing more than a wallet with legs and a path to American citizenship. The big question was, what was I going to do about this terrible situation? I couldn't sleep at all that night. Instead, I sat in my late husband's office, looking through 30 years of bank statements and property papers, trying to figure out exactly what Isabel thought she could steal from our family. My husband Tom had been very careful with money his whole life. We weren't rich people, but we had saved well over the years. The house was worth about $600,000, sitting on a nice lot in one of Phoenix's better neighborhoods. Our savings accounts, retirement funds, and life insurance policies showed we had built a comfortable middle-class life. Nothing fancy or flashy, but certainly enough money to tempt someone with Isabel's greedy plans. What scared me most was how quickly she had figured out our financial situation. One lunch at my house, and she already knew about inheritance money and property values. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment scheme. This was calculated predatory behavior by someone who had probably done this before. By the time the sun came up, I had made two important decisions. First, I would not tell Jake what I had overheard, at least not right away. He was so completely in love that any accusation from me would just push him closer to her and make me look like a jealous mother who couldn't stand seeing her son happy. I'd watched enough TV shows to know how that story always ends badly. Second, I needed to find out exactly who Isabel Laurent really was and what her real plans were. I started by looking her up online. Facebook, Instagram, and other social media sites. Her online presence looked polished but shallow, mostly pictures from the last year and a half. No old photos, no childhood friends or family members tagged in posts from years ago. The few pictures she had from France could have been taken by any tourist visiting for a week. Her work history claimed she managed hotel operations in Lyon, but the company names were vague and generic sounding, with no coworkers or bosses connected to her accounts. For someone supposedly in her late 20s with years of experience in hotel management, her professional connections were suspiciously thin. I was deep into internet detective work when my phone rang with Jake's name on the screen. My heart felt heavy with guilt. How do you talk to your child when you know something that will crush their dreams, but can't prove it yet?
Good morning, Mom.
Thanks again for yesterday. Isabel couldn't stop talking about how amazing you were. I bet she couldn't stop talking about me, but probably not in any nice way. She's absolutely lovely, sweetheart. I can see exactly why you're so crazy about her. I'm thinking about proposing to her really soon, he said, his voice full of excitement and joy. Maybe on New Year's Eve. I know it seems fast, but this feels so right. New Year's Eve, that was only 6 weeks away. My stomach dropped like I was on a roller coaster. That sounds wonderful, honey. Have you thought about how you want to propose? Where you might do it? While he talked excitedly about his romantic plans, I was doing math in my head. If they got married quickly after the holidays, she could apply for her green card by spring. 3 years later, she'd be eligible for permanent residency. 2 years after that, full citizenship. Then she could file for divorce, perfectly timed to get as much money as possible from community property laws. 5 years total. She was planning to systematically destroy my son's life over 5 long years, and he had no idea what was coming. Mom, are you still listening to me? Sorry, sweetheart. Just thinking about how excited this makes me feel. The lie came out easier than I expected it to. Have you met her family yet? Her parents or brothers and sisters? Not in person, but we video call with them sometimes. They live in a small town outside Lyon. Her dad fixes cars for a living, and her mom works at the local post office. Really down to earth, working class people, which is why she's being so careful about our relationship timeline. They want to make sure I'm serious before giving their blessing. Working class family who wanted to make sure Jake was serious. If they actually existed, they were probably horrified by their daughter's immigration scam. Or maybe they were helping her, coaching her through her long-distance destruction of an American family. That sounds very reasonable, I said carefully. Maybe you should visit them in France before you propose. Really get to know where she comes from and understand her background better. Actually, they're planning to fly here for Christmas. Isabel wanted them to meet you properly before we make anything official. She really values family approval and wants everyone to be comfortable with our decision. Of course, she wanted her fake parents to meet me, charm the American mother, establish herself as the perfect future daughter-in-law, then announce the engagement and rush toward marriage before anyone had time to ask hard questions or do any background checking. After Jake hung up the phone, I sat staring at my computer screen, feeling the weight of impossible choices pressing down on me. I could hire a private detective to investigate her, but that felt like crossing a line that might damage my relationship with Jake forever, regardless of what we discovered. I could confront Isabel directly and tell her I knew about her phone conversation, but she was obviously skilled at lying and manipulation, and I only had one overheard conversation as evidence. Or I could be patient, play the waiting game, and let her think she was winning while I quietly gathered the information I needed to expose her completely. That's when I remembered my nephew Danny, who worked for a law firm that specialized in immigration cases. Family connections can be remarkably helpful when you need to understand fraud schemes. Aunt Linda, you're putting me in a very awkward position here, Danny said carefully over lunch at my favorite restaurant. I'm not asking you to do anything wrong or illegal, I said, stirring my soup slowly. I just want to understand the general process and what warning signs to watch for. Educational purposes only. Danny laughed despite the serious situation. Educational purposes, right? And this has absolutely nothing to do with Jake's mysterious French girlfriend who appeared out of nowhere. You always were too smart for your own good, I admitted. Danny had inherited our family's sharp instincts and practical attitude. If anyone could help me figure out this mess, it was him. Tell me everything you know, he said quietly, leaning forward across the table. Don't leave out any details. So I told him the whole story. The overheard phone conversation where she called me names and revealed her plan, the thin online presence that didn't add up, the convenient backstory designed to hit all of Jake's emotional buttons. Danny listened carefully without interrupting, his expression growing more concerned with each detail I shared. "There are definitely red flags here," he admitted when I finished talking. "The timeline is very aggressive. Her background story seems superficial and rehearsed. And honestly, the whole situation sounds like a textbook case from our marriage fraud training materials." "There are training materials about this stuff?" "Oh, Linda, there are entire courses. Marriage fraud for immigration benefits is a huge problem, and we see variations of this pattern all the time. The difference is usually how sophisticated and experienced the fraudster is." Danny pulled out his phone and showed me a legal website with a checklist. "Look at these warning indicators. How many boxes does she check off?" As we went through the warning signs together, my heart sank lower and lower. Isabel wasn't just suspicious. She was practically a perfect example of marriage fraud red flags. Rushed relationship timeline, clear financial motivation, limited verifiable personal history, age and education differences that favored the immigrant, and systematic emotional manipulation of the American citizen. "The problem is," Danny continued, "knowing something and being able to prove it in court are two completely different challenges. These people are professionals who have studied American men. They know exactly what emotional buttons to push, and they're very skilled at covering their tracks and avoiding detection." "So, what would you do if you were in my situation?" Danny was quiet for several minutes, thinking carefully. "Officially, I would advise Jake to slow down the relationship, do proper background verification, and insist on visiting her family in France before making any serious commitments. And unofficially? Unofficially, I would gather as much evidence as possible, document everything carefully, and prepare for the possibility that by the time you have solid proof, it might be too late to prevent the marriage, but not too late to minimize the financial and emotional damage to Jake." The damage? My son's broken heart, his financial losses, his ability to trust women or believe in love again. The psychological effects could last for years, maybe even decades. Some emotional wounds never completely heal, especially betrayal this deep and personal. "There's something else you need to consider," Danny said carefully. "If she's doing this professionally and systematically, Jake probably isn't her first victim. These immigration fraud operations often work the same geographic areas and use similar methods repeatedly. There might be other victims out there, other sons and families she's destroyed with this same basic approach. Other victims. Other sons who fell in love with Isabel's lies and charm. Other families torn apart by her calculated greed." The thought filled me with a cold anger I had never felt before in my entire life. How would I find these other victims? Very carefully and completely legally, Danny warned me seriously. But if there are patterns of behavior, they leave paper trails. Marriage applications, divorce records, court filings for property disputes. Most of it becomes public information if you know where to look and how to search for it properly. By the time we finished our lunch, I had a clear plan of action. It wasn't a nice plan, and it wasn't a simple plan, but it was thorough and systematic. If Isabel Lauron was a professional con artist targeting American men, she was about to discover that Linda Peterson wasn't nearly as harmless and stupid as she appeared to be. That afternoon, I made 4 important phone calls. The first was to a private investigator that Danny recommended, someone who specialized in background verification with excellent discretion and a strong legal reputation. The second call was to my lawyer to update my will and establish some additional financial protections that had nothing to do with Isabel and everything to do with being prepared for any possible outcome. The third call was to my bank to put some temporary holds on certain accounts, just as a precaution. The fourth call was the most important one of all. "Jake, sweetheart, I've been thinking about what you said regarding Isabel's parents visiting for Christmas." "Yeah, what about it, Mom?" "Well, I'd absolutely love to host them for dinner when they come to town. A proper welcome to our family, you know? And I was thinking maybe I should brush up on my French language skills before they arrive. I'd hate for them to think I wasn't making an effort to communicate with them properly." The private investigator's name was Maria Santos, and she looked nothing like what I had expected from detective movies. No dark sunglasses or mysterious trench coat, just a professional woman in her 40s who could have been anyone's accountant or bank manager. Which, as she explained to me, was exactly the point of successful investigation work. The best investigations happen when nobody realizes they're being investigated, she explained, sitting across from me at my kitchen table with a thick folder and a cup of my coffee. Especially in cases like this, where the subject is already somewhat paranoid about potential scrutiny from family members. It had been 10 days since I hired her, and the preliminary results were disturbing in the worst possible way. Let's start with what we can verify as absolutely true, Maria said, opening her folder carefully. Isabel Loron entered the United States on a tourist visa 4 months ago. The address she listed on her entry documents is a month-to-month apartment rental that she left after 5 weeks, right around the time she would have started dating your son. So, she came here specifically to find a husband? It certainly looks that way. The timing and pattern suggest systematic targeting rather than any kind of natural relationship development. She pulled out a series of printed photographs from social media and dating websites. These show her online activity in the weeks before she left France. She was actively researching American dating applications, joining international romance websites, and participating in online forums about U.S. immigration procedures and requirements. The photos showed Isabel at her laptop in various Paris coffee shops, always working alone, always focused intently on her computer screen. Even in candid shots, there was something calculating and predatory in her expression that made me uncomfortable. Here's where things get really interesting, Maria continued. The hotel management company she claims to have worked for in Lyon, it did exist at one time, but it went out of business over 2 years ago. The professional references she gave Jake are completely fabricated. The phone numbers redirect to an automated voicemail service that plays generic pre-recorded messages in French. My coffee grew cold as Maria systematically laid out the evidence of Isabel's elaborate deception. Fake employment histories spanning several years. No verifiable permanent address in France for the past 18 months. And most damning of all, a pattern of social media connections and communications that suggested she had been in contact with multiple American men before focusing all her attention on Jake. Unfortunately, there's even more disturbing evidence, she said quietly, her voice taking on a more serious tone. I found clear documentation of at least 3 previous attempts at marriage-based immigration fraud. Different assumed names, different cover stories, and personal histories, but definitely the same woman using the same basic methods and approaches. She slid 3 more photographs across my kitchen table. The first showed Isabel with a middle-aged man outside a courthouse in Las Vegas. The second was a wedding announcement from a small newspaper in Colorado featuring Michelle DuBois and her American husband. The third showed her with yet another man at what appeared to be an engagement party in Florida. All 3 marriages lasted less than 18 months. All 3 ended in messy, expensive divorces with significant financial settlements in her favor. All 3 men are now dealing with serious debt problems and ongoing emotional trauma, while she disappeared back to France with American citizenship and a substantial portion of their life savings. I stared at the photographs, feeling physically sick to my stomach. Jake had no idea what he was getting involved with. Jake doesn't know any of this, I said quietly. Jake knows exactly what she's told him, which is a carefully constructed web of lies, Maria replied. But Linda, there's something else you need to understand, clearly. This isn't just simple fraud or lying about her background. We're dealing with someone who has systematically destroyed multiple American families and shows absolutely no signs of stopping or feeling any remorse. The room felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing closer around us. I felt trapped and overwhelmed by the scope of Isabel's criminal behavior. What should I do with all this information? Maria leaned forward, her expression becoming very serious and intense. That depends entirely on what kind of outcome you're hoping to achieve. Do you want to save Jake from making a terrible mistake, or do you want to make sure Isabel faces legal consequences for the crimes she's already committed against other families? Both, I said without any hesitation. I want both things to happen. then we need to be extremely strategic and careful about our timing. Moving too quickly could spook her into disappearing before Jake realizes what's happening to him. Moving too slowly means standing by and watching the fraud proceed exactly as she's planned it. Maria pulled out a detailed timeline chart with dates and milestones marked in different colors. She's planning to introduce her fake parents next week, probably hired actors trained to play their roles convincingly. The engagement will happen shortly after that, with a New Year's Eve proposal that gives them just enough time for a Valentine's Day wedding. Valentine's Day? Tax advantages, immigration timing, and maximum emotional manipulation all wrapped up in romantic symbolism. It's completely textbook for this type of fraud. Maria closed her folder and looked directly into my eyes. The real question is, are you prepared to play a longer, more patient game than she is? That evening, I sat in my backyard watching the sunset paint the Arizona sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. Somewhere across town, Jake was probably having dinner with his fraudulent girlfriend, talking about wedding plans and dreaming about their imaginary future together. And next week, I would sit across from hired actors pretending to be her parents, speaking my old French and pretending to believe in a love story that was actually an elaborate criminal enterprise. But Isabelle Laurent had made one crucial error in targeting our family. She had assumed that a 67-year-old widow would be easy to fool, too polite to ask difficult questions, too grateful for her son's apparent happiness to look closely at its source. She was about to learn that making assumptions about people could be a very dangerous mistake. The doorbell rang at exactly 5:30 p.m. on Saturday evening, and I smoothed my best dress one final time before opening the front door. Isabelle stood on my porch, flanked by a distinguished older couple who looked like they had been hired from a casting agency for sophisticated French parents. "Mrs. Peterson," Isabelle said, her smile bright and seemingly genuine, "I would like you to meet my parents, Claude and Simone Laurent." Claude stepped forward with old-world politeness, taking my hand and kissing it lightly in the traditional French manner. "Madame Peterson, we are deeply honored to meet the mother of the man who has won our daughter's heart so completely." His French accent was flawless, his mannerisms exactly what you would expect from a working-class car mechanic from rural France. Simone embraced me warmly, smelling of expensive French perfume and speaking in rapid, enthusiastic French about how wonderful it was to finally meet me in person. They were incredibly good at their roles, professional-level acting that would have fooled most people completely. "Please come inside," I said in my deliberately rusty French, adding some hesitation and grammatical errors to my pronunciation. I apologize for my poor language skills. It has been many, many years since I have spoken your beautiful language. The effect was immediate and revealing. Isabelle's eyes flickered with something that looked like relief, while her fake parents exchanged the briefest glance of satisfaction. They hadn't expected me to speak French at all, and my apparently weak skills made them feel safe and confident. They had no idea that my mistakes were completely intentional. Jake arrived just as we were settling into my living room, bringing flowers and wine and practically glowing with happiness and excitement. "Aren't they wonderful, Mom? I feel like I've gained a whole new family." As the evening progressed, I played my assigned role perfectly, the charmed future mother-in-law, delighted with these lovely people, asking gentle questions about their life in France, expressing how happy I was that Jake had found such a wonderful woman with such strong family values. But I was also listening very carefully to everything they said. And what I heard confirmed every single suspicion Maria Santos had raised during her investigation. Claude's stories about his automotive repair business were generic and vague, the kind of details anyone could create from internet research about French car mechanics. Simone's descriptions of her post office work contained internal contradictions within the same conversation. Most telling of all, when they spoke to each other in French, thinking I couldn't follow their private conversations, they revealed knowledge and cultural references that clearly belonged to Paris, not rural Lyon. "Could you pass me that bread?" Simone asked Claude in French. "This American food is so strange and bland." "At least the wine is acceptable," Claude replied, also in French. "Though I miss real French cheese. These Americans have no understanding of proper food." Meanwhile, In English, they were praising my cooking enthusiastically and expressing sincere gratitude for authentic American hospitality. The hypocrisy was breathtaking, but also provided me with valuable confirmation of their deception. But the moment that proved everything came during dessert service. Jake had gone into the kitchen to help me bring out coffee and cake when Isabel spoke quietly to her fake parents in rapid French, assuming complete privacy. "She's harmless but not completely stupid," Isabel said in a low voice. "Stay consistent with all the details we rehearsed, and don't get overconfident. We're very close to the finish line now." "The sun is completely under your control," Claude replied quietly in French. "When do you want to execute the engagement timeline?" "Next weekend." New Year's Eve proposal, Valentine's Day wedding. The emotional timing makes it very difficult for family members to raise objections or ask uncomfortable questions. They thought they were speaking in complete secrecy. They thought their criminal plan was perfectly safe. They had absolutely no idea that the harmless American grandmother serving them homemade apple pie and fresh coffee understood every single word of their calculated conversation. As the evening wound down and they prepared to leave, Simone took both my hands in hers with warm affection. "We are so grateful that our Isabel found Jake, and through him, found you. Family connections are the most important thing in life. Don't you agree?" "Oh, absolutely," I said, smiling peacefully. "Family is everything to me. I would do absolutely anything to protect the people I love from harm." After they left, Jake stayed behind to help me clean up the dishes, bubbling over with excitement about his wonderful future in-laws and their obvious approval of our family. They're incredible, aren't they? So genuine and warm-hearted. I can see exactly where Isabel gets her amazing character from. "They're certainly very impressive people," I agreed carefully. "Very polished and well-prepared." "I'm definitely going to propose next weekend," he said, his voice soft with nervous excitement. "New Year's Eve, just like in romantic movies. What do you think about that timing?" I turned away to load the dishwasher, ostensibly to hide the dishes, but really to conceal the expression of fury and determination on my face. "I think she's a very fortunate woman to have found someone as wonderful as you, sweetheart." What I was actually thinking was that Isabelle Laurent had just made her second critical mistake. The first mistake was underestimating my intelligence. The second was revealing her exact timeline while I was still in a position to completely destroy it. New Year's Eve was exactly 6 days away. She had 6 days to believe she was winning this game. I had 6 days to ensure she lost absolutely everything. That night, I called Maria Santos with 4 simple words: "Execute the plan immediately." Maria Santos arrived at my house early the next morning with 2 briefcases full of evidence and a plan that was both elegant and absolutely ruthless in its execution. "We move tomorrow evening," she said, spreading documents across my dining room table like a general planning a military campaign. New Year's Eve, exactly 1 hour before Jake's planned proposal. Maximum emotional impact, 0 escape opportunities for the target. The evidence was completely overwhelming and devastating. Bank records showing electronic wire transfers from Isabel's previous victims totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars. Immigration documents filed under 4 different false identities over the past 3 years. Photographs of her with different men, different families she had systematically destroyed across multiple states. Most damning of all, recorded phone conversations between Isabel and her criminal handlers, not fake parents, but an organized fraud network that specialized in marriage-based immigration schemes targeting vulnerable American men. "She's not just a lone con artist," Maria explained patiently. "She's a key operative in a sophisticated criminal organization. They identify suitable targets, create detailed false backgrounds and identities, provide trained actors for supporting roles when needed, and take a substantial percentage of whatever assets they can steal from their victims." I studied a photograph of Isabel with a man in his 50s standing outside a courthouse in Denver. The timestamp showed it was from just 14 months ago. How many families has she destroyed that we can actually prove in court? 9 that we can document with solid evidence. But the pattern suggests there are probably more victims who never reported the crimes or figured out what really happened to them. A conservative financial analysis showed She had stolen over $1.8 million from American families in just 4 years. 9 families completely destroyed, and Jake was supposed to be victim number 10. Here's exactly what we're going to do, Maria continued with military precision. Tomorrow evening, when Jake brings Isabel to your house for New Year's Eve dinner before his planned proposal, we're going to have some very unexpected visitors. Agent Michael Rodriguez from Immigration and Customs Enforcement will arrive during the main course, supposedly for a routine follow-up interview about her visa status. What he'll actually be doing is placing her under arrest for immigration fraud based on all the evidence we've compiled. The timing is absolutely critical, Maria warned me seriously. Too early, and she might somehow escape or run away. Too late, and Jake becomes engaged to someone who's about to be arrested and deported. We need to execute this plan with perfect precision. That afternoon, I went through the motions of New Year's Eve preparation like an actress rehearsing for the most important performance of her entire life. Shopping for Jake's favorite foods, cleaning my house until it sparkled, setting the table with my mother's best china and silverware. Every domestic detail felt surreal and dreamlike, knowing what was scheduled to happen in just a few hours. Jake called around 3 p.m., his voice practically vibrating with nervous excitement and anticipation. Mom, we'll be there at exactly 6 o'clock tonight. I'm going to propose right after dinner, just like we planned together. I've got Grandma's ring, and everything is perfect. Grandma's ring, my own mother's engagement ring, passed down through 4 generations of Peterson women, now about to be offered to a professional criminal who saw my son as nothing more than a walking ATM machine. That sounds absolutely perfect, sweetheart, I managed to say in a normal voice. I can't wait to celebrate this special moment with both of you. At 5:45 p.m. sharp, my doorbell rang with perfect timing. Agent Rodriguez stood on my front porch wearing a nice suit that could easily pass for dinner party attire. He was older than I had expected, with kind eyes that turned absolutely steel-hard when we discussed Isabel's criminal history and the damage she had done to innocent families. We'll wait until after you serve the main course, he said quietly, reviewing his arrest plan one final time. Let her get completely comfortable and confident. Let her think she's completely safe and in control. Then I'll show my official credentials and place her under arrest for multiple federal crimes. What's going to happen to Jake emotionally? I asked, dreading the answer. He's going to be hurt and angry, probably at you initially for not warning him sooner about your suspicions, Agent Rodriguez said honestly. But eventually he'll understand and be grateful. The alternative would have been watching her systematically destroy him financially and emotionally over the next several years, then disappear back to France with his life savings and American citizenship. At exactly 6 p.m., Jake's car pulled into my driveway right on schedule. Through my front window, I watched him take Isabel's hand and give her what was probably some last-minute romantic reassurance about his proposal timing. She looked absolutely radiant and confident, wearing an elegant black dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly car payments. She looked every inch the sophisticated European woman about to become an American bride through marriage to a devoted man who worshipped her completely. Jake was practically bouncing with nervous energy, constantly patting his jacket pocket where the engagement ring box created an obvious bulge that anyone could notice. Agent Rodriguez had positioned himself in my living room, pretending to read a magazine I had strategically placed on the coffee table. To Jake and Isabel, he would look like any family friend who had stopped by to celebrate New Year's Eve with us. Who's your guest tonight? Jake asked curiously, glancing toward the living room where Agent Rodriguez was sitting. Oh, that's Michael, my next-door neighbor's brother, I said smoothly, using the cover story we had rehearsed. He's visiting from out of state for the holidays and didn't have anywhere special to go tonight. I hope you don't mind that I invited him to join our celebration. Isabel's smile never faltered for even a second, but I caught a tiny flicker of annoyance in her eyes. An unexpected witness to the proposal wasn't part of her carefully planned evening, but it wasn't alarming enough to change her strategy. Just another minor detail to manage in her elaborate criminal performance. Dinner conversation flowed like a perfectly rehearsed stage play that everyone had memorized completely. Jake talked enthusiastically about his construction business, his plans for expanding next year, his excitement about building a wonderful life with the woman he loved. Isabel responded with flawless warmth and charm, asking thoughtful questions and making gentle jokes that had Jake laughing and falling deeper under her spell with every passing minute. Meanwhile, Agent Rodriguez made casual small talk about his government consulting work and complimented Isabel's dress, her accent, and her delightful stories about French culture and traditions. To anyone watching from outside, it looked like a lovely family dinner with a pleasant addition to the guest list for New Year's Eve. But I was watching Isabel very carefully throughout the meal, and as the evening progressed, I noticed subtle changes in her behavior and body language. The way her eyes occasionally darted toward Agent Rodriguez when she thought nobody was looking. The slight tension in her shoulders whenever he asked casual questions about her background or visa status. The almost imperceptible pause before she answered questions about her family in France or her plans for the future. Professional criminals develop strong instincts about law enforcement officers, and something about Agent Rodriguez was triggering every warning bell in Isabel's internal alarm system. She couldn't identify the specific threat yet, but her criminal instincts were telling her that something was dangerous about this situation. "This has been such a wonderful evening," Isabel said as we finished our main course, glancing at her expensive watch. "But perhaps we should start thinking about heading home soon. It's getting quite late, and the drive back to my apartment is rather long." Jake looked confused and disappointed. "But we haven't had dessert yet, and I thought we might exchange New Year's gifts and watch the ball drop on television." "Of course, you're absolutely right," Isabel said quickly, her smile brightening instantly to cover her mistake. "I'm just being overly cautious about driving in holiday traffic. There are so many drunk drivers on the roads tonight." There was no unusual traffic, and the roads were completely clear, but she wanted to leave immediately, and her desperation was starting to show through her careful facade. Agent Rodriguez stood up casually, brushing invisible crumbs off his suit jacket. "Actually, before anyone goes anywhere tonight, I should probably introduce myself properly to everyone." He pulled out his official federal credentials, his voice taking on unmistakable legal authority. "Agent Michael Rodriguez, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Miss Laurent, I need to speak with you immediately about some serious discrepancies and irregularities in your visa documentation and immigration status." The transformation in Isabel was instantaneous and absolutely chilling to witness. The warm, charming French girlfriend vanished completely, replaced by someone cold, calculating, and dangerous. Her fake accent disappeared entirely, revealing perfectly American English underneath years of practiced deception. "I have no idea what you're talking about," she said in a flat, emotionless voice. "All my documentation is completely legal and in perfect order." Jake was staring back and forth between them, his face showing complete confusion and growing panic. "What's going on here? What discrepancies? What's he talking about?" Agent Rodriguez pulled out his phone and showed Jake the photographs Maria had compiled during her investigation. "Mr. Peterson, the woman you know as Isabel Laurent is actually named Christina Walsh. She's wanted by federal authorities for immigration fraud, identity theft, and multiple counts of marriage fraud across 9 different states over the past 4 years." The engagement ring box fell from Jake's suddenly nerveless fingers, hitting my hardwood floor with a sound like shattering dreams and broken hearts. The silence that followed Agent Rodriguez's announcement lasted exactly 6 seconds. Then Jake exploded with fury and betrayal. "What the hell is happening here?" He spun around to face me directly, his eyes blazing with hurt and anger. "You knew about this. You knew, and you didn't tell me anything." "Jake, please let me try to explain the situation." "Explain what exactly?" "That you've been secretly investigating the woman I love behind my back? That you've been lying to my face for weeks." His voice cracked with emotional pain. "I trusted you completely, Mom. I brought her here because I trusted your judgment about people, and this is how you repay that trust." Isabel, Christina, whoever she really was, had gone completely still and silent, her mind clearly racing through possible escape routes and legal options. But Agent Rodriguez was strategically positioned between her and the front door, and backup officers were already surrounding my house according to the plan. "Mr. Peterson," Agent Rodriguez said gently but firmly, "I understand this is an enormous shock, but your mother probably saved you from years of financial devastation and emotional trauma. The woman you know as Isabel has systematically defrauded 9 other American men out of nearly $2 million over the past 4 years." Jake shook his head violently, in complete denial. "No, you're wrong about everything. This has to be some kind of terrible mistake. Isabel would never do anything like that. She loves me." He turned to her desperately, his eyes pleading. "Tell them they're completely wrong. Tell them this is all some horrible mix-up or case of mistaken identity." For a moment, I thought she might try to maintain her charade and keep up the French girlfriend act. Try one final manipulation to maintain her psychological hold on Jake's emotions and devotion. But then she looked at the overwhelming evidence displayed on Agent Rodriguez's phone, calculated her legal odds, and made a completely different choice. She laughed. It was a cold, cruel sound that had absolutely nothing of Isabel's musical French accent or warm personality. When she spoke, her voice was flat, American, and completely without remorse or regret. "Oh, Jake, you poor, sweet, incredibly stupid man." She picked up her wineglass and took a casual sip as if she were discussing the weather forecast. "Did you really think someone like me would fall genuinely in love with someone like you without having an ulterior motive?" Jake went completely white, as if all the blood had drained from his face. "What are you saying to me? You're boring, Jake. Predictable and tedious. The kind of man who thinks buying flowers and opening car doors makes him irresistible to sophisticated women." She gestured dismissively with her manicured hand. "I've played this exact role so many times, I could perform it in my sleep. Vulnerable foreign girl, charmed by American kindness, grateful for protection and financial security. It works every single time without fail." The cruelty was absolutely breathtaking. She wasn't just confessing to her crimes. She was destroying Jake psychologically for pure entertainment. The accent, the stories about France, my entire romantic personality, all of it was research and professional acting. "I spent 2 weeks studying your social media profiles, your interests, your psychological vulnerabilities before I ever approached you at that coffee shop." She smiled with genuine malice. "Did you think it was a coincidence that I was reading your favorite book when we first met?" Jake sat down heavily in his chair, like his legs could no longer support his weight. "The book about French architecture. You said a friend recommended it. Amazon customer reviews and purchase pattern analysis. I bought 6 different books I knew would appeal to lonely, divorced men in their 30s looking for intellectual connection with sophisticated women." She shrugged carelessly. "You were the easiest target in that coffee shop." Agent Rodriguez moved closer with handcuffs ready. "Christina Walsh, you're under arrest for immigration fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit marriage fraud, and wire fraud across state lines." But Christina wasn't finished with her cruel performance. She looked directly at me, with eyes full of pure hatred. "You think you've accomplished something meaningful here, old woman? You've destroyed your relationship with your son forever to prevent something that was always going to end badly anyway. I would have divorced him in 18 months, taken my financial settlement, and disappeared back to Europe. Now he'll spend the rest of his life wondering if every woman who shows romantic interest in him is just another con artist looking for money." She turned back to Jake, who was staring at her like she was a complete stranger, which, of course, she always had been. "Your mother didn't save you from anything, Jake. She just guaranteed that you'll never be able to trust love or relationships again." Agent Rodriguez led Christina toward the front door in handcuffs, but not before one final revelation that changed everything I thought I understood about this entire situation. "Wait," Christina called out as they reached my front hall. "Don't you want to know about the real Isabel Laurent?" Agent Rodriguez paused in the doorway. "What about her?" Christina's smile was absolutely vicious and filled with malice. "She's completely real. 28 years old, lives in Lyon with her parents, works in hotel management exactly like I claimed in my cover story. I studied her social media accounts for months, stole her identity piece by piece, and built my entire fake background around her actual life. My blood turned to ice water in my veins. What exactly are you telling us? I'm telling you there's an innocent woman in France who has absolutely no idea her identity was stolen by a criminal who might be getting visits from American immigration officials asking questions about her fictional boyfriend and his family in Arizona. Christina's eyes glittered with pure spite and revenge. I'm telling you that your investigation might have just destroyed a completely innocent person's life along with your son's happiness. The front door closed firmly behind them, leaving Jake and me completely alone in the wreckage of our New Year's Eve dinner. Jake sat motionless at my dining room table, staring at the scattered evidence of his completely shattered fairy tale romance. Is it true? He asked in a quiet voice. What she said about there being a real Isabel somewhere in France? I sank into the chair across from him, suddenly feeling every single one of my 67 years. I don't know for certain, sweetheart. Maria, the investigator I hired, will have to look into that situation immediately. Maria? Jake's voice was completely flat and emotionless. How long have you known about all of this? 3 weeks. Since the night she was on the phone speaking French, calling me horrible names and explaining how she planned to manipulate you into marriage, then divorce you for your money and American citizenship. I heard everything she said. For the first time since Agent Rodriguez had revealed the truth about Christina, Jake looked directly into my eyes. She called you what kind of names? It doesn't matter now what she said about me personally, I replied. What matters is that you're safe from her criminal plans. David was quiet for a long moment, processing everything that had happened. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed, a bitter, hollow sound, but not entirely without some dark humor. A boring, predictable target. That's actually pretty accurate, considering how completely she fooled me. Jake, that's not true at all. She's absolutely right about one thing, Mom. I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust my own judgment about women again. He stood up slowly and walked to the window where he could see Agent Rodriguez's car driving away into the night. 3 weeks, he said again. You knew for 3 weeks that the woman I thought I loved was planning to systematically destroy my life, and you didn't tell me anything about it. You wouldn't have believed me if I had tried to warn you. Maybe not initially, but you could have at least tried to tell me the truth. He turned back toward me, and I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before, disappointment so deep and profound it looked like grief. Instead, you orchestrated this entire evening. You let me make a complete fool of myself, getting excited about proposing marriage. You let me bring her into our family home for one final performance before you brought everything crashing down around us. He was absolutely right, and we both knew it. I could have handled this situation differently, found some way to warn him gradually, tried to protect him from the public humiliation of having his girlfriend arrested in front of him during what was supposed to be the most romantic night of his life. I was trying to protect you from being hurt, I said weakly. By lying to me? By investigating behind my back. By treating me like I was too stupid and naive to handle the truth. Jake picked up the engagement ring box from the floor, staring at it like it was something toxic and dangerous. This was Great-Grandma's ring, wasn't it? Yes, it was. She would have worn it during our fake marriage, then taken it with her when she divorced me and disappeared. Great-Grandma's ring would have ended up in some pawnshop or sold online to fund her next criminal scheme. The thought hadn't occurred to me before, but it hit like a physical punch to the stomach. 5 generations of family history and sentimental value, reduced to criminal profit and resale value. Jake pocketed the ring box and headed toward my front door. I need some time and space to process all of this. Jake, please wait. I love you, Mom, but I can't be around you right now. Every time I look at you, I'm going to think about how you didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth about what you suspected. The door closed quietly behind him, leaving me completely alone with the remains of our New Year's Eve dinner and the crushing weight of choices that had been both absolutely necessary and utterly devastating at the same time. But Christina had made one final strategic mistake in her parting shot of revenge. She had revealed the existence of the real Isabelle Laurent, which meant there was still one more chapter to this complicated story, one more chance to find something redemptive and healing in all the wreckage and pain. That night, I called Maria Santos with new instructions and a different mission. Find the real Isabel Loran and help me figure out how to make this right for everyone involved. 3 months later, I was standing in the International Arrivals Terminal at Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport, holding a handwritten sign that said Isabel Loran in my neatest handwriting. The real Isabel Loran was exactly as Christina had described her in her stolen identity. 28 years old, petite, with the kind of effortless French elegance that cannot be faked or imitated. But where Christina had been calculating and cold underneath her charming facade, the real Isabel radiated genuine warmth and authentic kindness. "Mrs. Peterson?" she asked in accented English, approaching me cautiously in the busy airport. "I am Isabel, the real one, I think you said on the phone?" I couldn't help smiling despite the serious circumstances. "Yes, you're definitely the real Isabel. Thank you so much for agreeing to come all this way." What had started as damage control and legal cleanup had evolved into something much more meaningful and important. Maria's follow-up investigation had revealed that Christina's identity theft had indeed caused serious problems for the real Isabel. French authorities had questioned her extensively about her supposed American boyfriend. Her bank accounts had been temporarily frozen pending an international fraud investigation. Her reputation in her small community had been damaged by association with international criminal activity that she knew nothing about. But more than that, we discovered that Isabel was dealing with her own family crisis that made the situation even more complicated. Her father was battling cancer, and the medical bills were threatening to financially destroy her family. The money I had offered to bring her to Arizona for a face-to-face meeting and explanation had been gratefully accepted as a chance to earn some desperately needed income during an incredibly difficult time. "I still don't completely understand everything," Isabel said honestly as we walked toward my car in the airport parking lot. "Why would someone want to pretend to be me? My life is not so interesting or special." It was perfect for her criminal purposes, I explained as we drove through Phoenix traffic. Real enough to be verifiable if anyone checked, but ordinary enough not to raise immediate suspicions. "She studied your social media posts, learned about your work and family, and then used all of that personal information to create a believable cover story for her immigration fraud scheme." Over the next 4 days, I got to know the woman my son should have met instead of the criminal who had nearly destroyed his life and his ability to trust other people. Isabel was funny, intelligent, and refreshingly honest about her own struggles, dreams, and disappointments. She was also nursing a broken heart from a relationship that had ended badly 8 months earlier when her boyfriend had been cheating on her with her best friend from childhood. "It is very strange," she said on her second evening in Arizona as we sat in my backyard sharing a bottle of wine and watching the sunset. "This criminal woman, she stole my name, my personal history, even my heartbreak, to make her fake story more believable and sympathetic. It feels like being robbed of your own identity and life experiences." "I'm so sorry this happened to you," I said sincerely. If I had known there was a real person behind Christina's stolen identity, I would have handled things differently. "You would have done exactly the same thing," Isabel said firmly, without any hesitation. "You protected your son from a dangerous criminal. That is exactly what any good mother would do in that situation." Jake had finally agreed to meet Isabel on her last day in Arizona. He was still barely speaking to me about anything important, but his curiosity about the real person behind Christina's elaborate lies had eventually overcome his anger and resentment toward me. They met at a small cafe downtown, not far from the coffee shop where Christina had first approached him with her calculated seduction. I watched from across the street as they talked for nearly 3 hours, their body language gradually shifting from awkward formality to genuine interest and comfortable conversation. When Jake brought Isabel back to my house that evening, something fundamental had changed in both of them. "She's nothing at all like Christina," he said quietly to me while Isabel was using the bathroom. Everything that felt artificial and too perfect about Christina, the way she always said exactly what I wanted to hear. Isabel is the complete opposite. She's authentic and real. "What does that mean for you going forward?" I asked carefully. "It means I'm going to drive her to the airport tomorrow, and then I'm going to think very seriously about what I want to do with my life next." What Jake decided to do next surprised everyone, including himself and me. 6 weeks after Isabel returned to France, he booked a flight to Lyon. Not for romance or any kind of relationship, he insisted to me, but to see for himself the real life that Christina had stolen and twisted into her fictional criminal narrative. He returned home 2 weeks later with a completely new perspective on trust, love, and the important difference between falling for a fantasy and connecting with an authentic person. "I'm not ready for anything serious or committed," he told me over dinner at my house, the first meal we had shared together since New Year's Eve. "But Isabel and I are going to stay in touch, maybe visit back and forth occasionally, and see what develops naturally between us without any pressure or expectations." "And what about us?" I asked. "Are we going to be okay eventually?" Jake was quiet for several minutes, thinking carefully about his answer. "You were absolutely right to investigate Christina and stop her fraud before she could destroy my life. But you were wrong not to trust me with the truth about what you had discovered. If we're going to rebuild our relationship and trust each other again, it has to be based on complete honesty between us, even when that honesty is difficult or uncomfortable." I understand that completely, and I agree. Do you really understand? Because if Isabel and I do eventually develop something real and meaningful, if she moves here or I move to France, I need to know that you'll respect our choices and decisions, even if you disagree with them sometimes. I promise you that, and I mean it sincerely. 8 months later, I received a wedding invitation written in elegant French script and beautiful calligraphy. Jake and Isabel had decided to marry in a small, intimate ceremony in the French countryside, surrounded by lavender fields and the kind of authentic French landscape that Christina had only pretended to know and love. As I filled out my RSVP card with excitement and genuine happiness, I reflected on the strange and unexpected journey that had brought all of us to this point. Sometimes the worst deceptions and betrayals can lead to the most honest and meaningful connections between people. Sometimes protecting someone you love means allowing them to make their own mistakes and learn their own lessons. And sometimes when you think you're ending one story, you're actually creating the beginning of a completely different and much better one. The real Isabelle Laurent was nothing like her criminal imposter in any way. And that turned out to be exactly what my son needed to learn how to trust love and relationships again. At their wedding in France, as I watched Jake and the real Isabel exchange vows in both English and French under the warm Mediterranean sun, I realized that Christina's cruel prediction had been completely wrong. Jake hadn't lost his ability to trust love. He had simply learned the difference between authentic love and calculated manipulation. Sometimes the most painful lessons lead to the most beautiful outcomes. Thanks for listening to my story today. Don't forget to subscribe to Granny's Voice, and please share your own experiences in the comments below. Every voice and story matters, and I love hearing from all of you. If this story resonated with you or reminded you of your own experiences with deception or family challenges, please hit that like button and let me know where you're watching from around the world. Remember, protecting the people we love sometimes requires difficult choices, but the truth always finds a way to create something better in the end. Until next time, this is Grandma Stories reminding you that family, honesty, and authentic love are the most important things in life. Take care of yourselves and each other, and I'll see you in the next story.